Okay, so get ready because today we're tackling a giant Isaac Newton, like you said, really diving deep into his world.
That's right. And yeah, there's so much more to him than just that Apple story everyone knows.
Right. It's a classic, but it's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Newton.
Exactly. His work, his life, it's all incredibly fascinating. A lot more complicated than most people realize, too.
And that's why we're here, right? To unpack all of it, you've brought a ton of sources biographies, scientific papers, even some accounts that are, shall we say, less flattering?
Yeah, we're going to get into all of that. Buckle up.
Okay, so let's start by setting the scene, right? It's England in the 1600s, time of huge change, huge discovery.
The Renaissance is really in full swing.
And that's where Isaac Newton comes in, 1643, same year Galileo died. It's almost like a passing of the torch, right?
Pretty striking coincidence, yeah. And, just like Galileo, Newton ends up challenging everything people thought they knew about the universe.
He really did turn the world upside down.
He really did.
But his story, it doesn't start in some fancy university or anything. It's actually pretty rough.
Yeah, he had a difficult childhood.
His dad died before he was even born.
That's right.
And then his mom, she leaves him to be raised by his grandmother.
Yeah, not exactly a storybook beginning. And a lot of biographers think, all that instability, that early isolation, it really shaped him.
Made him kind of, fiercely independent?
Exactly, especially when it came to his work. Like he had something to prove.
And that drive, that's definitely going to come in handy when he finally makes it to Cambridge, right?
Cambridge University, yeah, the big leagues.
Although he wasn't exactly a star student right away, was he? I mean, at first he's just blending in.
Finding his footing. It takes a global pandemic to really shake things up.
I wouldn't say that about all students, but okay, 1665, the plague hits England.
The Great Plague. It was terrifying.
Cambridge shuts down, everyone's sent home, terrified.
Can you imagine? You're at Cambridge, on the cusp of all this knowledge, and bam, world shuts down.
Right. Back then, no one knew if they'd survive.
It makes you wonder how many other breakthroughs were completely derailed by that. But anyway, back to Newton.
So he's back home in Woolsthorpe, right? And this period of forced isolation, this is what we now call his annus mirabilis.
Latin for Year of Wonders, which is kind of ironic given the plague and all.
Right, like the worst time in the world. But for Newton, it's this period of incredible intellectual growth.
Away from all the distractions of university life, he just, I don't know, his brain just explodes with ideas.
Okay, so let's talk about these wonders because we're already, 20 minutes into this? And he's invented calculus in his pajamas.
Well, not quite in his pajamas, but yeah. During this time, he lays the groundwork for calculus, a whole new branch of mathematics, basically.
From scratch. Mind-blowing, even for someone who barely passed high school math.
It's huge. I mean, think about it. Before Newton, mathematicians, they really struggled with describing things that were constantly in motion.
Like a ball flying through the air,
Yeah.
or the planets orbiting the sun.
Right, or even just the speed of something that's accelerating.
Okay, so how did calculus solve that?
It gave them the tools to measure those changes precisely over time.
Okay, so it's not just, hey, the ball is moving. It's, here's exactly how fast it's moving at this very moment, and here's where it'll be in 5 seconds.
And here's the force needed to move at a certain distance, that kind of thing.
It's like he handed us the mathematical language to describe a world that's constantly in motion.
And that's just the beginning. We haven't even gotten to gravity yet.
So we've got Newton, right? Back from his plague-induced retreat, armed with all these groundbreaking theories about math, about the universe.
Yeah, he had a pretty productive quarantine, wouldn't you say?
Understatement of the century.
Yeah.
But he doesn't keep it all to himself, right?
Yeah.
He's got to share this with the world.
Oh, absolutely. Fast forward to 1687, he publishes his masterpiece, Principia.
Principia, catchy title.
Oh, the full name's a mouthful. Philosophia Naturalis Principia Mathematica. Yeah. But yeah, Principia for short. It changed everything.
Several of the sources you shared call it the most influential science book ever written.
And for good reason. It's hard to imagine, but before Principia, no one could really explain why things moved the way they did.
Okay, so explain it to me like I'm still stuck back in the 1600s pre-Principia world.
Well, you might observe, say, an apple falling from a tree or the moon moving across the sky, but you didn't have a way to connect those things, to explain them with one set of rules.
And Principia, that's where Newton lays it all out.
Exactly. He not only describes these motions, he lays out the mathematical laws behind them. It's like he gave us a cosmic instruction manual.
And this is where his 3 laws of motion really come into play, right? Inertia, force and acceleration, action and reaction.
You got it. It might sound kind of basic now, but only because he defined them so clearly. With Principia, suddenly you could calculate the exact force needed to, say, move an object a certain distance, or predict a planet's orbit around the sun.
It's like he gave us the tools to not just observe the universe, but to actually understand, like, the mechanics behind it. It's incredible.
It is, and it's part of what makes him such a towering figure in the history of science. But, it's important to remember that even geniuses are human.
You're about to tell me he wasn't always the easiest guy to get along with.
Let's just say he had a bit of a competitive streak. Remember Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz?
Oh, yeah. The sources mentioned a bit of a rivalry there, something to do with calculus.
More like an all-out academic brawl.
Huh?
Turns out both Newton and D. Leibniz, they each independently developed calculus around the same time.
Oh, wow. I can see how that would cause some tension. Two brilliant minds, both convinced they'd made this huge discovery, which, let's be honest, revolutionized math. So who was right in the end?
That's the thing about these big discoveries. Sometimes multiple people really do arrive at similar conclusions completely independently. Nowadays, both of them, Newton and Leibniz, they both get credit. But back then, forget it. It was a huge feud. Accusations of plagiarism flying back and forth.
I guess even geniuses have their egos, right? But okay, so we've got Principia, we've got the calculus drama. What else did Newton get up to? He didn't just rest on his laurels, did he?
This is where things take a bit of an unexpected turn. Remember, this is a time when the lines between, like, science and government, they weren't so clear. So in 1696, guess what? Isaac Newton, the guy who cracked the code of gravity, he gets appointed Warden of the Royal Mint.
Hold on, the physics guy, the calculus guy, he's put in charge of money.
He was a man of many talents, what can I say? And he took the job seriously. At the time, England had a massive counterfeiting problem.
People were just printing their own money. I can see why that would be bad for the economy.
You have a huge mess. And Newton, he uses his analytical mind, his meticulous nature, and he goes after those counterfeiters.
So instead of like universal mysteries, he's tackling what? Forged coins and economic stability? What did he actually do?
He basically became a master detective, improved the whole process of how coins were made, introduced new anti-counterfeiting measures, some of which, by the way, are still in use today.
That's wild. From like the laws of the universe to the laws of the land. Talk about range. It really makes you wonder. What was going through his mind during that time? Was he still pondering gravity while also like outsmarting criminals?
It's a fascinating thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
This whole chapter really shows you the breadth of his intellect. But of course, even for Isaac Newton, time waits for no man.
And on that cheery note, so here we are, end of the road. We've journeyed through what, like, the better part of Newton's life from that isolated childhood.
And don't forget the plague. Talk about a formative experience.
Right. The plague years, the years of wonders, Principia, even his stint as a, master counterfeiter catcher. It's a lot.
It really is. And it kind of makes you wonder, what's the biggest takeaway here? What's Newton's most significant contribution? Where do you even start?
Right. Is it the laws of motion? Is it calculus? Is it the fact that we're not all walking around with pockets full of fake money thanks to him?
I mean, those are all huge, obviously. But I think, for me, it's how he fundamentally changed the way we understand the universe. Like, he didn't just make discoveries, he reshaped the whole framework of scientific thought.
So it's bigger than just the what, it's the how, the way he approached the world.
Exactly. Before Newton, people had this idea that there was like the heavens, and then there was the earth, and they were governed by totally different laws. And Newton comes along and says, nope, same rules apply everywhere.
Right. The apple, the moon, it's all connected.
Gravity, it's this elegant, unifying force that governs it all. Nobody had ever thought about it like that before.
It's like he took a universe that seemed completely random and chaotic and showed us the clockwork mechanism underneath it all.
That's a great way to put it. And that idea, the clockwork universe, it had a huge impact on everything that came after. Newton showed the power of observation, of experimentation, of using math to make sense of the natural world. That's what modern science is built on.
So he wasn't just revealing these new truths, he was giving us the tools to uncover even more truths.
Exactly. He was all about asking why and then finding a way to prove it. Though, it's important to remember, even Newton, he didn't have all the answers. His work, it wasn't perfect.
There's still things he got wrong.
Of course. And that's okay. Nobody's perfect, right? Even Newton. That's the beauty of science. It's always evolving. We get to build on the work of the people who came before us. Like Newton himself said, we stand on the shoulders of giants.
Which I think is a nice way to bring this whole thing full circle. You don't have to be Isaac Newton to make a difference or to be curious about the world, right?
Absolutely. The biggest takeaway from Newton's story, I think, is that anyone can embrace that curiosity, that willingness to ask questions, to look for answers. Who knows what you might discover?
I love that. Embrace your inner Newton, everybody. Ask why and never stop looking for answers. And on that note, I think we're done. Another deep dive complete.
Until next time.
That's right. Until next time,
Ugh.
keep those brains buzzing, folks.